Good. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. This is very exciting for me to be able to talk to you about your work. I'm going to reintroduce myself briefly for people who are listening to this conversation. My name is Lucas Mertehikian. I'm the director of the Humanities Institute at the New York Botanical Garden. I run academic and public-facing programming at the intersection of plant, people, and culture. So I was extremely excited to visit your exhibition, Herbaria at Hutchinson Modern, because it resonated a lot with some of the work that both scientists, librarians, and humanists do here at the New York Botanical Garden to preserve biodiversity and to educate the public on the complex relationship between people, plants, and landscapes. And I really thought that your work was extremely inspiring, not only for the audience in general, but also potentially for scientists and to bridge conversations between people who are usually not in contact, but who all love plants. So if that's okay with you, Deborah, I have a few questions. They're all related to your relationship with art and plants.
Yes, I'm
Should we
ready.
start?
Thank you for this the opportunity. I look forward to talking to you.
Great. The first thing I wanted to ask you, it's a very general question. And I wanted to know what's your relationship with plants? I know everybody has a special relationship with plants, and I was wondering, how did you arrive to plants? Did you arrive to plants through art or other experiences such as gardening, for example?
My connection with plants goes way back to my childhood. I especially remember my father's astonishing garden around the house. And when I think about plants, I think my relation with them started there. My father would come home from work and would dedicate about 1 hour to the garden. And when we have guests, he would take the guests on walk through in his garden, showing them the new species and all the transformations of the garden. These moments, I remember that they were very simple, very humble, with no hurry and it became a form of conversation, a way of relating to each other that felt so balanced, so centered. And maybe because of this experience, I always thought that gardens ground us in something real. And if you think about today, in the technological age, the act of following the pace of plants, observing them, I think it carries more meaning than ever. Now that I live abroad, whenever I go back, it is as if our conversation has stopped when I left and started again at that moment that we observe the transformations of the garden. I believe that the garden gives us a sense of the passing of time, of nothing remaining the same. And for me, that garden is also a very important connection with my roots.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure in this conversation we will be talking more about plants and transformation and how plants transform our experience of place too. Um, but you were just talking about this personal relationship that you and your father had with your garden, which is interesting to me because, as you might know, a lot of botanists and biology teachers have referred to people's general lack of attentions to plants, and sometimes they've coined terms to refer to this condition, such as plant blindness or plant awareness deficit, which are terms that want to describe how people don't usually notice plants in their surrounding and how important they are to sustain human life on Earth. So I was wondering if you see your work as a form of challenging this human inattention to plants.
And my work with flora is also an attempt to make plants and their matters visible. And I believe that plant awareness deficit is a structural problem embedded in how we learn to categorize and prioritize things in life. It seems more of a cultural issue to me. I was reading some findings and hypotheses from scientists on the causes for this low awareness deficit. And they give some reasons for that, like the plant's lack of movement, lack of a face, the visually chromatic continuity that does not provide them actually any element for the eye to fixate. For me, it seems that plants are not completely unseen, but rather they are placed in the background. And in my opinion, we have taken out nature in a sense. We most likely live in urban environments, and we focus on our jobs, careers, and personal achievements. And plants plants are not our main interests. And I think the ability to appreciate the vegetable world is something that is immediate, is innate. But then when kids get far from it, for instance, I think they need to be educated. Plants could play a central role in education from the very, very early years, and we should do our best to raise awareness about the complexities of the vegetable world. And my work does not aim to simply highlight plants, but more to question the systems that obscure them. I also try to reframe plants as active agents rather than passive backgrounds. I bring plants into speculative spaces, partially generated by AI. I explore how technology might shift attention towards the vegetable world rather than just revealing plants. I seek to complicate how we perceive them as data, as lost species, but mainly as emergent futures.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And what you were just saying about plants not being just the passive background of human or animal life, but rather active agents, I think really resonates with your work and with the next question that I have, which is that you work with very different media, from video to prints and other materials. And I was wondering, what does each medium offer to represent plants as either fixed or lacking movement, or rather as changing beings?
In my plant research, I'm always looking for perfect combinations. If these combinations are altered, they may collapse aesthetically, alluding to the delicate equilibrium of ecosystems. And the stillness of these images allow the image to reveal themselves slowly. They may look attractive at first, but then afterwards it may give a sense of loss. The images that I registered in the blockchain are used in my video Plantalia. I animate them in order to show a multiplicity of organisms that are in constant negotiation with the environment. They seem suspended in a state of perpetual transformation. On the other hand, in the herbaria installation, I presented isolated images that resemble pressed dried materials from herbaria pages. And most of these plants are extincted or critically endangered. In the herbaria video, instead, I bring back to life these dried pressed materials and make them flicker for a while before they vanishing again in the background, back to their cabinets. I had this inspiration while talking to a botanist about how difficult it is to bring back plants to life when they go extinct.
And I was very, very taken just now by what you were saying about the video showing plants. You said, I wrote it down, suspended in a perpetual state of transformation, which I think it's a beautiful contradiction that pretty much captures what plant life is about and how your work with AI shows plant life to be. Um, so talking about that, I'm very interested in the relationship that your work establishes with both AI and blockchain. Um, and I'm sure you know that AI is being used today in a number of projects across the natural sciences, including, of course, botany, to sometimes identify plant species, both in the field and in huge databases, including, of course, digital herbaria. But in your work, you seem to use AI to imagine new forms of life rather than to identify existing forms of life. So I wanted to ask you if you can comment a little bit more on how you started working with AI and plants and how it has impacted your creative process overall.
This what said is absolutely correct, and the technology in this my plant research is really important for me to be able to convey my message. One of the main worries that I had at the beginning of this research was to avoid having my artworks perceived, appreciated just for the beauty of its forms, textures, and colors. So it was the technology that helped me to convey my message. On one hand, the blockchain allows me to build a not changeable permanent virtual archive that acts as a symbolic archive of plants that we risk losing. On the other hand, I started using AI because the results were richer. And let me say something more about that. When I started using AI, I was interested in the ways that AI models interpreted botanical structures, how they process and regenerate plants based on existing data. And rather than use AI, as you said, to identify species, I use it to create speculative, artistic ones, try to expand the notion of what a plant might be. This approach initially has initially shifted my creative process toward algorithmic unpredictability and digital permutations. However, in this process, I felt immediately the need to control it and elaborate artworks strongly connected to my practice. So I start to try to fine-tune the AI models to my own data sets. Fine-tuning is essential for the model to answer me in my own style and subjects. And besides my own style and subjects, sometimes I really need to do that because the models does not know about the plant that I want to create. In these cases, I create data sets to train the model on specific plants. And, the models and data sets are kind of complex to manage. It is a long process of testing what worked for you. And I use a historical archive of images of paintings, drawings, photographs, and videos from my previous research that's called Firmamento. I had been collecting these elements over the years, so it's a huge database. And this database was fundamental source for the data set. So my artistic process has changed a lot. Now it is ironically much longer. One might assume the opposite with AI. And the reason I use AI is to be able to choose from potentially infinite outcomes. Above all, outcomes that carry multiple references to my own experience, to my own historical archive.
It's fascinating what you were just saying about your creative process now taking longer using AI, because we tend to think of AI as something that will make our not only creative but professional processes in general simpler and more like streamlined, and instead you're using it to complicate things rather than simplify things. So I appreciate that a lot in your work. You touched on this briefly, but I wanted to ask you more about how the use of AI relates to your previous work, like Firmamento.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. Uh, the images created using AI look very much similar to those from my Firmamento paintings. So much so that some people often cannot tell if they are digital or traditional painting. But the relationship between the plant project and the Firmamento research does not involve only aesthetics. Firmamento explore the fragmentation of images, the fragmentation of narratives and memory. AI extends this logic by introducing a generative element, where the act of creation is mediated by an algorithm trained on botanical data sets and my own painting style. In Firmamento, I explore the historical colonization of the Americas and relate it to the digital colonization that we experience today. There are many similarities between these two, and AI is such a major breakthrough that it actually may facilitate and accelerate the digital colonization, but at the same time, it could enhance knowledge, improve predictions, provide great control over ecosystems. And I am an optimist by nature. And I would say that the main cause of extinction, that is monoculture, that it disperses a huge amount of toxic chemicals in the environment, may become something from the past. I even believe that AI may help revert back to more sustainable agricultural practices, resulting in higher crop variety, utilization of local seeds, crop rotation, and the integration between agriculture and ecosystems.
It's refreshing to hear someone being optimistic, but I do have to say here at NYBG, there is a lot of work being done in that direction, especially to, as you were saying, to go back to traditional agriculture methods that might be more resilient to extreme weather events brought on by climate change. So I agree that there are reasons to be optimistic about these changes in technology. Um, and and going back to what you were saying about AI and current trends in culture and art, although the NFT boom seems to have passed already a couple of years ago now, it is still true that blockchain has been used to establish the authenticity many times of an art piece, to establish its unique value, especially when it's digital. Um, and in a similar way, I find that in physical herbaria, botanists, as you know, always have what they call type specimens. So type specimens, for those who are listening, are the specimens that are established as the first or the most important type of a certain species, so that every botanist will go back to an herbarium and compare their own specimens collected with this sort of original, right? Um, so how do you see your use of blockchain in this sense? What do you find interesting about blockchain that you wanted it to be your archive of originals in a way?
Yeah, for me, the blockchain is an alternative model of preservation, and I consider blockchain as a more as a conceptual extension of an herbarium, like a decentralized archive where a digital original exists as unique, but then you can have modifications or copies of it. And NFT, for instance, is pretty much used in for authenticity purposes. You can establish authenticity, and you could link that to an asset, to a real physical specimen, or to a genome sequencing of a plant. If herbaria are physical repositories of knowledge, blockchain can function as a dispersed digital herbarium where each recorded plant representation is unique, immutable, infinity, but at the same time, infinitely distributable. It could be copied, it could be changed, it could be shared.
That's very interesting. Again, I think it's fascinating how you're treating blockchain, as you said, as a way of preserving rather than as a not only value, but also not only economic value, rather, but also biodiversity value. And speaking of biodiversity, I want to talk also about the landscapes that inspire you, the different landscapes that inspire you. Because your various series features plants from North America, but in your plant series, you work mostly with Latin American species. So how do you choose what plants you want to work with for different projects, and how do you think of your practice in relationship with these very different ecosystems?
In general, I prefer to include local endangered species in my exhibitions, even when commissioners may want me to focus on international flora. I think that local plants can resonate with people at a deeper level. And Raj Hutchison Gallery specializes in Latin American artists and is located in New York. Therefore, I decided to focus on these geographic regions. It was not very easy to gather information about plants. Some countries in Latin America I think, do not invest much in flora. Therefore, there are limited assessments available for me to work with. And on the other hand, my work with herbaria, that was mainly focused on the New York State, was easier, and in the sense that I could gather more information. And it was also a learning experience about the flora of the New York State and of the New York City, its evolution, the importance of urban parks and reserves for the local biodiversity, but also for New Yorkers. It was interesting to see how a highly densely populated area values and invests in its flora. You have also the magnificent New York Botanical Garden with its huge herbarium, rich library, collections, and worldwide importance. In the herbaria selection, I include also some plants from Hawaii. Hawaii has such a rich biodiversity, being an island and isolated for so many years. It has innumerous endemic species. Hawaii is also interesting to me because of the indigenous population. that believes in reincarnation of its ancestors as plants. That was very, very interesting. And they have sustainable agricultural practices. And they really feel like being part of nature. Plants are, for them, a family. So they don't see nature as many people do as a commodity to be exploited. It's part. They are part of nature. They consider themselves as part of nature. And I think their history and current challenges regarding flora is a huge learning opportunity, and also an alert to humanity regarding the conservation of biodiversity.
It's that's very rich. Thank you. And it makes me think of something that you mentioned before when you talked about the extinction. Now that you were talking about endangered species and the deep relationship that people, visitors, people who will see your exhibition can feel, the deeper connection they can feel with local species, species that they might be familiar with, species that even across different generations they might have seen disappeared, right? In their hometowns, for example. So I was wondering, you mentioned before that you've been in conversation with scientists who have explained what the challenges with de-extinction projects are. There are many now, even in botany, as I'm sure you know. Many different herbaria are working to find viable seeds in historical specimens that might be able to resuscitate in a way species that are extinct, at least extinct in the wild, right? So I wondered if you see your projects in relationship with, in conversation with these de-extinction scientific programs, uh, including the ones that resort to herbarium specimens.
Herbaria um, talks about the difficulty of reviving extinct species, and scientific de-extinction aims to restore lost species and involves acts of reconstruction. My work is less about biological revival and more about reimagining botanical presence within contemporary culture. It's more related to addressing what we were talking about before, addressing the plant awareness deficit, trying to keep the complexities of the plant world in mind and trying to establishing connections between people and the flora.
Thank you for that. And as we approach the end of our conversation, I wanted also to think of your work in relationship with other contemporary artists who are thinking through some of the same issues that you're tackling in your show. Recently, art critic Yota Batsaki has said that plants, and I quote her, are having a moment in contemporary art. So I was wondering if there are any artists, contemporary or not, or any artworks that inspired herbaria and plant.
Yeah, I'm very happy when there are other artists that are dealing with this subject because I think it's very important. The more we are, the better. I was inspired Roman by a Roman fresco from the Villa of Livia, and it is one extremely important artwork, yet not very well known. It is located in Rome. I could talk about that fresco for hours. But I'm also inspired a lot by many articles and books that I read, and by dialogues with fabulous botanists, geneticists, humanities scholars. That's all very exciting to me, very enriching. And in plant research, I can say that has become my lifelong project. I try to be as precise as possible in my scientific research, accuracy is crucial to me. And when I talk about the scientific part of it, I think talking about ecosystems requires a lot of care and attention to details. I do not want to be superficial. I do not want to oversimplify things. I prefer to maintain the necessary complexity. I also avoid perpetuating misconceptions or to act as a echo chamber to any dubious message. So one one very important thing to me as well is I think that my work plant, or the beauty of it, that it has no barriers. I'm working with different professionals from different fields. It's really, really very, very interesting. It goes beyond art. I also like when my work relates to practical affairs, or when it can be used to promote useful projects. For example, one project of mine is related to urban gardens and urban gardens, and how public and private gardens can support endemic or endemic local endangered species. My work can contribute to discussions, for instance, conserving old large trees for their biodiversity importance instead of cutting them down. And so any opportunity like this for me is very important. And I am enthusiastic when my work goes beyond art. And this potential, and also I'm very enthusiastic about its potential in increasing awareness about flora.
Thank you for that. That's very rich, and I was thinking when you were talking about your creative process in parallel to your own planned research. And the importance of being scientifically accurate and bringing this research into your creative practice. That, as you know, we've had scientists from NYUG go visit the show, and this is one of the things that they appreciated particularly about the show, that you were very, very carefully, very attentively working through that relationship between plant science and art. So thank you for that. And now, for our last question, it's a question about the future. We've talked about the future when we talked about endangered species. We talked about being optimistic regarding the potentialities of AI in managing biodiversity loss, and how your work can be seen in relationship to those efforts. But I wanted to ask you, what plant stories or what other nature stories you look forward to exploring in the future?
I I'm thinking about the field of humanities, and I'd like to establish narratives that focus on plants, mankind, society, literature, history, and I am fascinated by the readings that you suggested me in the field of humanities, and I'm starting to explore the creation of some storytelling related to certain plants. And I'm learning a lot. Plants carry a world of relationships and subtle connections that I would like to explore. Some readings inspired me a lot and opened new perspectives. I'm not a writer, I'm not a botanist. So my focus will be a combination of visual and storytelling centered around flora and humanities through specific plants. So I really thank you for your visit to my exhibition, and I really thank you for your important support in this direction.
Well, thank you for your work. Debora, it was, as I said, it was really inspiring. I was very, very lucky to come across your show that will be up through March 8th at Hutchinson Modern. And I really look forward to future conversations about plants, storytelling, and I really want to see how your work keeps working through these issues. So thank you. Thank you for this talk.
Thank you very much. Bye, Lucas.
Bye.